When we talk about housing, I think it's best to talk about it from a step model. We start on the ground floor. This is the unhoused. You're living out of your car. You're facing housing insecurity. Maybe you're living in an encampment. We want to get you out of this spot, mainly because it's cold, you're in a dangerous situation, and you don't have the resources you need to succeed. This is why shelters are important. You come into a shelter, you do an intake form. There's a wide array of requirements as well as needs that individuals might have, depending on, say, education status, new Canadian status, disability, things like that. And this is what an intake form will help you do. It'll assess your goals and viability for going to different stages. So after a shelter, you might take, during the shelter, you might take 3 months, 3 weeks, really depends on the individual, depends on how much you're working for it. When it comes to building integrity and trust with the people around you, the surrounding staff. So shelters are just the foot in the door. That's getting people fed, it's getting people sheltered. But ideally, we want to get people into transitional housing and later stages of housing. Transitional housing gives you a little bit more independence. You're still under security, you're still getting that support, but you have a little bit more autonomy. You've built enough trust for people to be able to trust that you're going to be good around them. Next is supportive housing and market housing. Now, what I want to outline is a person coming into the shelter will meet other people going and aspiring for different stages here. Some people, it's independence, but this isn't always viable or obtainable for everyone. Some people will only get to market housing or supportive housing, and that's okay. But what it is important for individuals is to find a cohort that are working for the same goals. If I'm in a shelter system and my goal is independence versus someone who maybe isn't in the right state of mind for that or doesn't have the maturity level to be able to strive for this, well, that's not necessarily the best thing for me. I might relapse because of that person. I might struggle to get to that next step because the community around me, the environment, is not supporting me in that way. So that is why, say, transitional housing is important from a shelter perspective. Now, what does Penticton have? Well, Penticton doesn't really have transitional housing. We have a shelter system that in some ways has to act as stage 2 housing, and we have supportive housing that sometimes has to act as like that step 2.5. This puts strain on both our supportive housing and our shelter system, mainly our shelter system, especially the people in the shelter. So in our shelter currently, say at PDSCL, we have a bunch of individuals who would be ready to make that next step for stage 2, but they're not ready for the step of stage 3. It's more of a risk. There are some people who try it, but it's going to be less viable for success. What would be helpful is having a step 2, say in tiny homes, where the people in the shelter who have showed their trust and built our confidence are able to go up. So back to the encampment, to answer your full question, people in the encampment need a spot in the shelter. They need resources in the shelter. By creating the tiny homes, we're alleviating the pressure in the shelter. We're creating more resources for them. So when the people in the encampment come in, they'll have resources within the shelter to be able to succeed. But the people in the shelter who have already showed maturity or their motivation to get to higher levels have a spot where they're not having to deal with people who are just getting off the street. So that's really why there might be a misconception when people think about the encampment. They think we're going to build this step and people are going straight into this. And that's not the case. What's actually going to happen is people are going into the shelter, and the people who have already showed that they can exceed and get to the next level of the shelter will go into our tiny homes. So I hope that really kind of allows you to have confidence about what's actually happening and not feed into any misinformation.